Most people, like my sister, your mom, whoever we want to talk about, that are not in our ecosystem, they don't understand that it's not a model. Most people are thinking, oh, I'm prompting a model. Well, you're not anymore. You're prompting an orchestrator, which is prompting an ensemble of models behind it. And that's how we're going to go forward. That's how we're actually going to get to, if you look at many of these people, Kurzweil and all these other folks, Bostrom, they've all come off the AGI track. Now they're talking about super intelligence. We're going to have super intelligence in these domains or in these small areas or something like that.
Technology is changing faster than ever. But the most important conversations aren't about the tools. They're about the ideas and the people shaping what comes next. On the Bridgecast, I sit down with the leaders driving change, from AI and cybersecurity to the infrastructure powering modern business. Together, we explore how technology moves business forward, what they're seeing, what they're building, and what it means for the rest of us. I'm Scott Kinka, and this is the Bridgecast. Presented by Bridgepoint Technologies. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridgecast. I'm super excited that today we're joined by John K. Thompson. He's an AI and data leader, author, educator, and consultant. John has led AI and analytics groups at major organizations, including EY, and he now teaches AI, entrepreneurship, and product management as an adjunct professor at the University of Michigan. I think super importantly, he's also the author of several influential books, one of which I've tattered up here, called The Path to AGI. He's also written Data for All and Causal Artificial Intelligence, which is a topic we're going to get into today. Across that work, he challenges hype-driven thinking and argues for a more disciplined AI roadmap built on strong data foundations, causal understanding, and enterprise-ready systems that solve actual real-world problems. John, welcome to the Bridgecast.
Thanks, Scott. So excited to be here. This is really, I have been waiting for you to invite me on. I was actually going to reach out and say, hey, dude, where's my invitation? But it finally came. So patience was paid off.
Can you just give us a quick and dirty, how'd you get started in this business? Where did you land? I mean, some of it's covered in the book, but you can spoil it a little bit right now.
I've been doing this for 38 years. I, originally was an auto mechanic. I was never going to go to college. And, I left high school. I worked for a year as an auto mechanic. And then I thought, there's got to be a different way to go. So I ended up doing an undergraduate in computer science and then ended up in Chicago. And it just seemed obvious to me I think it was 1988, that everything was going to be about data. Just everything was going to be about data. And I started talking to people and they all just looked at me like I was nuts. Like, no, it's the code, it's the programming, the data's nothing, the data's garbage, data's everywhere, it's useless. And I'm like, I don't think that's the way it's going to go. So then over the next, 30 plus years, I've just been working with data and analytics and intelligence. I got involved in AI in about 1991. Or so. IBM wrote their first neural network utility, and I was working at IBM, and I got my hands on it. From then on, it was just AI and intelligence all the time.
You spent 4 decades, I think you said something along those lines, data analytics, ultimately that leads you to AI. So let's take that vantage point for a moment. What's different about this AI moment? And I don't mean just specific to AI, but just this moment, I guess you could say, versus every previous wave. We had cloud, we had internet, we had networking. Is this just the next wave, or is there something intrinsically, humanity altering maybe about this moment? How's it different?
Well, I think it's different because we've gotten far enough in the 7 years we've been working on AI with predictive AI, neural networks for the most part, symbolic AI, neurosymbolic AI, that's all come together in a way that it is now ensconced in our infrastructure. Enterprise corporations have lots of predictions for marketing and sales, and Amazon has a ton of predictions on what we should buy next and all that other kind of stuff. Predictions are part of our life and part of our technology. And now lay on top of that generative AI that's been here for now about 3 years or a little bit more than that. And soon we're going to have, we have causal AI, but soon we're going to have physical AI. So, we're going to add another pillar to the AI world. So up till now, it's always been touch and go. Is AI going to fall off? Are people going to use it? Is it trustworthy? Can we, make it enterprise scale and responsible and ethical and all that kind of stuff? And the answer's been kind of, I don't know, maybe, but the answer is emphatically yes now. We are past the point of going back. There is no going back. I still get, oddly enough, I still get questions from executives. Like I said, I teach at Michigan. I've talked to over 500 companies in the last 4 years about AI. And invariably, someone will grab me by the arm and kind of pull me over to a corner and go, whisper in my ear, can I wait it out? Is this just going to go away? Is it going to fade off into the background? And I'm like, no, it's just like math. It's like asking, when will math end?
Every one of these waves built to the next one. I mean, we don't get AI without cloud because we have the infrastructure to support it. We don't get cloud without internet. We don't get internet without networking. So this is just accumulation, I guess, of where we were headed.
Yeah, it's just stacking on top of each other. There's no doubt about it. We talked about it, and in the book, I talk about the AI winters. And those are all based on overselling what symbolic AI could do. We're past that now.
I want to explore a little bit of that history in a moment, but park that for one sec. I want to go back there and sort of reorient around when you say, 70 years in the book. I think people think this is a 3-year-old technology, and I do want to kind of walk that out. Before we jump into the history, let's get controversial for a second. And I'm sure it's the first question everybody asks you, and I know you do interviews a lot. You did one yesterday. You were telling me. You argue that true AGI is likely more than a century away. And I think many of your compatriots don't agree, or at least are thinking about it differently. Maybe their definition is different. A, back that up. But I mean, B, while you're doing that, why do you believe the industry has become fixated on something, that in your mind is so distant?
Let's tackle the definitional part of that question first. And, Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Ray Kurzweil, all those people and I are out there talking about, Rodney Brooks and I, talking about artificial general intelligence. And the one thing that we agreed on maybe 2 years ago, I haven't asked those gentlemen what their definition is now, but at one time the definition was when AI acts and interacts with you in the same way that an above average undergraduate student does, we have AGI. Pretty simple definition, empathy, sympathy, understanding, memory, awareness, thoughts, all that kind of stuff. I don't see any AI engines doing that. And I teach undergraduates, so I'm in the room with them all the time. And I don't see any AI engine acting in that way. Now, that was the unified definition that all the men that I cited and myself agreed to. All right. So when you start tearing that apart and going, okay, when are we going to get sympathy? When are we going to get empathy? When are we going to get novel thoughts? When are we going to get sentience? When are we going to get psychological awareness? I don't see that happening in another 100 years. I mean, at least 100 years.
How would we even know sentience at the end of the day, John? I mean, the systems are so good at mimicking. And I guess that's a lot of, frankly, what you're talking about as we get through these stages, which we'll get in a minute. Like, we've been talking about the Turing test for decades right now. Like, would we even know? Let me park the question for a second. I talked to my mom and she's like, you talk about these AI things. I don't know what you're talking about. I just know I saw this video of the robot saying that the way to, save the earth is to kill the humans. And I'm like, well, Mom, it was informed on every movie script that we wrote over the last, 40 years. Yeah. That's just mimicry, right? And that's an extreme example, but give me some thoughts around sentience. Like, will we even know when AGI happens? There's not some moment. It's going to be like, hey, I woke up. Happy birthday. When will we know?
It will be difficult to know, that's for sure, because AI probably won't tell you that it's sentient. There'll be all sorts of tests. But, the thing that I talk to people about now is that, okay, you're working with Claude Code, Mistral's models, OpenAI, whoever. And most of the time you go back and you end a session, you go out and have a coffee or go for a run or whatever, and you come back and you start another session, it doesn't even remember you. So memory alone would be a good thing. I talk to people, and I know Apple's working on this. They're trying to fix it. But I mean, how many times does Siri get you to the right Starbucks? So, we got to work towards this. We got to work towards memory. We have to work towards, ideas and concepts and higher level views. Most people like my sister, your mom, whoever we want to talk about, that are not in our ecosystem, they don't understand that, it's not a model. Most people are thinking, oh, I'm prompting a model. Well, you're not anymore. You're prompting an orchestrator, which is prompting an ensemble of models behind it. And that's how we're going to go forward. That's how we're actually going to get to, if you look at many of these people, Kurzweil and all these other folks, Bostrom, they've all come off the AGI track. Now they're talking about super intelligence. We're going to have super intelligence in these domains or in these small areas or something like that. Okay, I still don't like the tag. I still don't think it's, very close to us getting there, but I like the idea because that's how we're going to get there. Is that, I'm an AI optimist. I think we're going to do all the things that we say we're going to do. It's going to take a lot longer than most people believe, but we are going to end up with a mixture of experts, which is, just a technical term for a bunch of models behind our orchestrator that are focused on trigonometry, calculus, algebra, mathematics, biology, string theory, physics, economics, getting your kid into the best college, you name it, we're going to have models for it. So the idea that most people have this idea in their head that AI is a straight line. We started in Dartmouth in 1956, and here we are 70 years later in 2026, and it's been a straight arrow from one point to another. That's not the case. It's been a very, very circuitous ride. And people back then, Marvin Minsky told a PhD student, figure out computer vision in the span of a semester. Well, he didn't get it done. This idea that AGI or artificial general intelligence runs through large language models or runs through Gen AI is completely misinformed. Because Gen AI is nothing more than a large neural network that we jammed the entirety of the internet through, and it matches patterns. Do you remember, like 2.5 years ago, we were talking about emergent behaviors? People were like, oh my gosh, it's doing interesting things. The neural networks are, they're coming alive. They're waking up, they're having new ideas. And I'm like, no, what it's doing is it's finding dark alleys that you've never gone down, and it's illuminating those. So it's just matching patterns and giving you patterns. It's, someone called it a stochastic parrot, which I think is probably a good description of it.
I want to move like my personal conversational assistant to like Claude or Gemini, and I can't get off of my original ChatGPT model because it agrees with me all the time, and I'm so smart after all the time I've worked with it. By the way, I said to you, like, the book's going to end on the Hall of Fame. I talk about it here on the thing. I just figured out where you're going to go because I have Ray's book, The Singularity is Near, back here. I'm just going to slide you right next to him since you guys know each other. And that book's come up a handful of times on this show. I want to get into the history, and then I want to get into kind of the disciplines that you talk about around foundational, generative, causal, because I think it gets us to your endpoint, the way you think about it, which I think is novel. You probably don't feel like your approach to it is novel. You know what I mean? But you're talking about it in a way that's accessible to most people. And that's no knock on your friend Ray, but like that's some heady stuff when you read him. Like you're making it very practical. So I want to dwell there and probably spend most of the rest of our time together on that. But before we get there, I have one question that I wanted to come back on, because you were talking about executives earlier and like this rush to do something. And am I going to be left behind? Like if you're an executive right now, whether that's on the IT side or worse yet, you're a CEO or board of director who's pointing at your CIO and going, go do something. So I have some fun story to tell to our shareholders. If you're that person who's worried you're not moving quickly enough, right? How should you balance pressure to innovate and then the discipline that's required to invest in capabilities that are actually going to deliver something to the business? What's your simple advice when somebody sits down over a cocktail, not in a boardroom, about how to balance, pressure versus outcome?
I always tell people, whether they're on the board or the CEO, the chairman of the board, CIO, CTO, whatever they are, I tell them, I tailor my advice to their situation, but the theme generally is you're not behind. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. This will go on for a long time. Now, I understand your 16-week quarterly pressures. I get that. I understand what you got to do. So, start out in enabling your entire organization to be AI literate. That's what I tell them to do is get these tools in the hands of everybody and don't worry about what they're doing. A lot of people are like, I'm going to give you AI, but you can't do anything but work on it. Well, now you've just cut off all their motivation and interest to be engaged. When we built one of these systems at a very large corporation, we told people we're not watching what you're doing because we weren't, and we don't care what you do. Now, we did spot checks, and I saw there were places where people were writing sonnets to their puppies and planning their 3-day vacation to Vermont and things like that. And that's fine. Do it. Understand how this stuff works. So number one, get everybody involved. Number two, start looking at your processes, because that's really where the friction is. If you don't reorganize your work processes around agentic workflows and AI capabilities, you're never going to really realize the value. That's been the problem that we've had for the last year, is that boards and C-level executives were sold on AI, on personal productivity, but they were expecting strategic change.
I walk into businesses every day in my current role where, the first thing we talk about is, all right, now, great. I love the idea of that agent. What are we going to train it on? And they're like, well, we train people over the shoulder. And you're not going to inform it off of call recordings, right? That's where we get all the, so you've got to bridge that gap. Often, I think that's where businesses struggle. Can we jump into the history? And we don't need to go super long given where we're at, but most people, when you make a statement like we've been at this for 70 years, probably raise an eyebrow. We don't need to spend 5 minutes on it, but just walk us through kind of the beginning, where you think we are today, and then maybe a little bit about what that looks like in the decades to come.
If you're listening and you're interested and you have a browser, go out and search for the Summer Dartmouth Symposium. And that is where the phrase artificial intelligence was coined. And it was Marvin Minsky and Vannevar Bush and John McCarthy and all these computer science whizzes coming together to define what artificial intelligence should be. Now, they were supposed to have a summer-long symposium all arguing it out, but it didn't transpire that way. But what you should read is the document that came out of it. It is the seminal definition. I hate to use the word Bible because it's so loaded, but it is the tabula rasa of AI. It defines what AI should be, and it took us 70 years to get there. So if you really want to know where it started, that's it. All right. So then we jumped forward and we got into the 60s, and it was operational research and all this other kind of stuff. And people were trying to figure out how to play chess and checkers and those kind of things. Then we jumped forward into the 80s, and we had, as we talked about, the AI winters. It was all about symbolic reasoning, rules engines, and things like that. And those are great. I love symbolic AI. I think it's a fabulous technology, but we overloaded it back then. And then everybody, it didn't deliver. It couldn't deliver. It was impossible for rules-based systems to deliver on what we said it would do or what they said it would do. So investment dried up, research stopped, all this kind of stuff. And then the three guys ended up in Canada, Hinton, LeCun, Bengio, and they really drove the whole idea of neural networks forward. And I was at IBM at the time, and I was working on neural networks as well. So then neural networks has taken us, from the 80s to where we are now. And generative AI is really just another implementation of a neural network. But as I said earlier, we jammed the entire internet through it. Now, people seem to think that's magic. No, that's just scale. And the compute power and the memory and the interconnected nature, like you said, it all stacks on top of each other. Without these substrates, this couldn't happen. So now here we are. And like I said earlier, we're at the mixture of expert stage. It's not you prompting Opus, you're prompting an orchestrator, which is then tearing your prompt apart, sending to a bunch of models, which are then coming back. The orchestrator's reassembling it and sending you an answer. That's the way the world is going to go for about the next 30 years. All right. The mixture of expert moment is going to last a few decades. Then what we're going to see is, like you said, predictive AI or foundational AI, generative AI, causal AI are all going to be integrated together. We're going to have composite AI in about 40 years from now. And then we're going to start seeing physical AI come into it, maybe even a little sooner. And then we're going to work on having all of these different engines working together behind the scenes. So when that recedes into the background and those engines are all integrated together, then we have the promise of AGI.
You are listening to the Bridgecast, proudly sponsored by Bridgepoint Technologies. When it comes to customer experience, Bridgepoint delivers innovative solutions that empower your business to stay ahead. Visit bridgepointtechnologies.com to learn how we can transform your customer experience today. I love the way you look at this because you're right. You can't get here. We think of this like seminal moment right now where we've moved to prompt engineering and it can just do stuff, right? But the reality of it is you did have this decades-long rules-based moment, right? Which we didn't consider intelligence because we had to give it the instructions. It still then took the rules and made correlations and did things, right? I think, is it a fair, I'm saying this from your lens, right? Is it fair of me to go, when you go from rules-based to kind of the generative, model that we're in right now, the difference is that we're in prompting versus having to build the sub rule set stubbed out, largely speaking. And now we can at least get there without creating a bunch of A/B, rules-based choices. We still have to prompt it, and it still has to ultimately hit a rule set that hits a set of data that creates correlations. So you've got to feed it something to get something out of it. That's ultimately the difference in terms of us getting to general.
I don't know if you've heard of Gary Marcus or not. Gary is the godfather of symbolic AI, and he's always out there picking at Yoshua Bengio and Jan LeCun, saying, yeah, you can't, neural networks aren't everything. Symbolic AI is great. And he, put out a post the other day that, someone had found that Claude Code, actually one of its back-end processes is a symbolic rules engine. And he was like, see, Gen AI isn't everything. And I'm like, Gary, relax, man. The whole world is a stack of models or a series of models. It's not just one model. Anybody that thinks that we're going to get to where we need to go on one architecture or one model, sadly mistaken.
I don't even know that we have solid human-based definitions of original thought. I mean, there's this giant debate in music right now. You've got Suno and these, that are derivative engines where the musicians are going, well, you're not musicians. Well, I get it. But listen, if you write a song right now, you're doing it, a rock song, you're doing it because Paul McCartney was the best bass player in rock ever, and everybody plays like him now. And because we know, we got a 4 on the floor, trap set, beat, and that's been happening for, like, everything's a derivative ultimately of something, including human language. I think that's going to make it harder for us to get to that point where we define sentience too, because it's like we only have our current patterns to be able to make the next best definition. So everything's going to be derivative forever, really, at the end of the day.
And it's very interesting, people trying to talk about what is original and what is derivative. But like you said, pretty much everything's derivative. But there's been a really interesting resurgence in philosophy majors. Computer science has had a tough year too, because of all the, hey, we're never going to need another developer, which is a silly position. But they are hiring people who talk about metaphysics now. And, what is real and what is not real and what is original and all this other kind of stuff. So it's really, there's not going to be the end of developers, and there's not going to be the end of entry-level jobs coming out of colleges. But I am heartened by the fact that they're hiring more philosophers.
I can't dismount from your 70-year history before I say, like, I often in these kind of talks, when I have these questions, I'll go further back and grab, like, we didn't have the tech yet, but Asimov was writing about this, 2 decades before this started. I'm waiting to be able to apply the 3 rules. That's going to happen. I don't know. It's by your point, maybe in another 100 years, we're going to be worried about doing no harm. I wanted to find 2 things, and then I think we can jump into a little bit of fun. You've gone foundational, generative. I think people get that. Can you define causal and then, ultimately composite a little bit better in terms of like how if you were to do it in a couple of sentences, we get generative. Give me causal and then give me composite in a little bit more detail.
Causal's fantastic. And I wrote a book on causal, as you mentioned in the intro, probably 2 years ago, or no, probably 3 years ago now. It was before Gen AI exploded, because I was thinking, oh man, causal's next. And I was wrong about that. So I'm wrong about different things. I'm wrong about a lot of things. But anyway, so causal is a really interesting branch of calculus. Judea Pearl wrote the Book of Why. He's a professor at UCLA. He's been working on this pretty much his whole life. So he's created a new branch of calculus called do calculus. So you can go in and define an environment. And one of the great things about Gen AI is causal AI was held back because it was hard to understand how to model causality formally. Now, Gen AI has ingested all the information about causality that we know in the world, so you can use Gen AI to create what are called directed acyclic graphs, which are what causal AI is based on. So you can use Gen AI to generate, causal graphs that you understand, and then you can ingest it into a causal platform, and you can model. A causes B, but it's confounded by C, and it's influenced by D. So it's really a branch of mathematics that we use to model something quantitatively that we understand intuitively, but it's hard for people to get a grasp on it from a mathematical perspective.
In a lot of ways, it's the generative AI developed version of the rules-based engine that you were talking about, right? Like we wouldn't get the causal without generative in the middle to help build, effectively correlations past what we can process individually. Is that a fair way of putting it?
That's a fair way to put it. Absolutely.
And then you're talking about getting to composite before we get to general. Explain composite.
Now we're starting to see overlaps, and it's developers, smart developers, they're doing things with open source platforms and proprietary platforms and things like that. Like I said, we see people taking Gen AI models and generating causal graphs or DAGs, directed acyclic graphs, and then driving causal AI. That's hand knitted, that's hand rolled or rolling your own or whatever you want to say. But what we're going to see over the next 30 years is that like Mistral and other companies will then bring in causal engines into their Gen AI platforms. And other people like Tibco or other companies will bring in their predictive engine and marry it with causal or marry it with generative. So what we'll see is different engines being integrated together by professional software developers. Right now, it's just roll your own. But over the next 30 years, composite AI is going to be a professional integration of causal, predictive, generative, and physical.
At some point in that window, the lines blur and we don't really know what general actually is. But if you just follow the source, right, the thing just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. But I don't know if there's the happy birthday moment really is the point. I don't know why we want it so bad.
We shouldn't want it so bad.
Ultimately, rules, this whole thing started with rules. Man, if we could get this really working to the point where it feels sentient, but it's still built on the rules base, then we have what we want. I don't know that we want to get to general really at the end of the day. Let me hit you with two fun ones, and then we're going to get into a couple, interesting questions. But there were a few things that I really enjoyed at the beginning of the book. First off, I'm going to give you like a crazy recommendation on this because, we're talking about some of the tomes around AI. And I'll just say to our listeners, who have it, our CIOs and directors of IT who are dealing with practical things on a day-to-day basis, John does not mess around. Like by page 11, he's in step 1 on what you should be doing with your data. So, there's a lot of theory in here, but it's also a really good roadmap, which I enjoy. So, and we'll get to that at the end, chatting a little bit more about that. But getting to practicality, you mentioned I really early on, maybe page 6, you were like, never propose, build, or support tech for a manager of a company or a company where the technology you are building is not at the core of the organizational mission. And you were doing it while you were bemoaning your life, like fixing some 18-hour networking, challenge. But put those two things together, right? Like there's somebody listening to this who probably is enjoying this the morning after fixing an 18-hour networking problem that we still have, explain that statement. Like, isn't the network, and maybe you mean that, but isn't the network still core to the organizational mission, or at least the plumbing on which the house has to be built?
Every company needs a technology infrastructure and then need databases and DBAs and network administrators and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's fine. My career, I've always driven to be in a technology organization and an organization that's driving innovation through technology. And through that, my career, I've ended up at different companies that are not technology companies. And what I've always found is that my personal mission to be involved in leading edge technology and driving innovation is always thwarted by someone who cares more about the trains running on time, which I'm not that kind of guy. I'm an innovator, I'm a driver, I'm a technologist. I'm not an operator. If you work in a company that's, I worked at GATX, which runs the US's largest network of train cars. It's important to get the train cars in the right place at the right time. But personally, I don't care too much about that.
You're, in front of the next generation of tech leaders right now at the University of Michigan, and you're talking about AI and entrepreneurship. What are the questions that they're asking you about AI that like the current generation of enterprise leaders that you consult with and work with and talk to aren't asking? Like, what can we learn from their curiosity that maybe we don't have?
They're fantastic. I teach mostly graduate students, but every now and then undergraduates do slip into my class. They get special approval or dispensation to be in there. And it's great. The undergraduates will say things that are just ludicrous, but they say them because they're young, and that's fine. And I applaud them for it. So first thing that they always ask me almost every semester is, when is the apocalypse coming? When are we all going to die? When is AI going to take over and Arnold is going to, I'll be back and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's not happening. Don't worry about that. It's all fine and good. And then, the graduate students are more in alignment or more aligned with these themes of questions is, okay, we have all this information. How do we harness it, in a way that we can disrupt different industries? How can we make sure that we're doing things, we have $1 billion company with 2 employees and 6,000 agents. So they're really interested in understanding how to scale this to global levels and have some level of control. They don't really care too much about control because they're young and, they're looking for fast, but they do have some notion of control in there. So generally, they're looking for ways to use these technologies to disrupt, the existing world order.
Fair to say they're less enamored with the tech and more enamored with the outcomes, maybe, than some of the executive level conversations you're having?
I'd probably change the word from enamored to focused. They're like, oh, what, so what? The tech is there. We can use it. It's something that we've had forever. How do we actually turn it into something that is a competitive edge for us?
I think I know the answer to this question already, but I'm going to ask it so we have it in a moment. What is your most contrarian opinion about the current state of enterprise AI?
Gen AI is going to be the panacea that solves all problems.
Besides the path to AGI, I know you probably don't read your own work and Ray's work. What's on your nightstand right now? It doesn't have to be tech. Like, what are you reading?
I have been going back to it, and it's right behind me here, Man's Search for Meaning.
It's interesting that a scientist and a thought leader around AI is reading that as well. I think it says a lot about the way you're thinking about, next stages here. I love that. Tell me about, okay, this is a fun question. I've asked it on every single episode we've done, and this is like episode, 106 or something along those lines. We get to the end of the world that your students were talking about. You can pick whichever dystopian future you want, but there is one app that's still working on your phone. If you could choose it, which one would it be?
Spotify.
Why?
I like music. It soothes me. It gives me comfort. It allows me to while away the hours in my thoughts. I don't really need to connect with other people, and if it's a dystopian future, then I kind of want to be in my own little bubble. So
we're going to do 2 segments. We're going to do some snippable moments. Now, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you some questions. We may have already hit on them, but that's okay. What I'm challenging you to do is answer them in a sentence without extra clarification. All right. Harder than it sounds, maybe. All right. Okay. What do most leaders misunderstand about artificial general intelligence?
They get caught up in the fancy idea of it, not the practicality of it.
What is causal AI?
It is a way to understand the world that we live in as opposed to the world we think we live in.
In 10 years, what will business leaders wish they had done differently today?
Got started sooner with AI rather than worry about preparing for AI.
Define AI literacy in a business for me?
The ability for every employee to sit in front of a prompt window and drive AI in a meaningful way.
I like it. Okay, now I'm going to put you on the spot even more. New segment. We're calling it This or That. All right. Some fun ones, and then we'll get back into tech. The World Cup or American football?
American football. I'm from Chicago.
Podcast or audiobook?
Podcast.
University classroom or corporate boardroom?
Classroom every day.
Chat GPT or Gemini?
Gemini.
Build it or buy it?
Depends on what you need.
Okay, fair. Enterprise software inside of a business that is not a tech company. You know, your CRM, your ERP, whatever. Buy it or build it.
Buy.
Correlation or causation? You can't answer it. I already know the answer. I just want to have some fun with it. All right, last one. Here we go. I'm not even asking you to answer that one. An impressive AI demo or a boring agentic AI that actually does something and produces ROI inside the business?
The latter.
I love it. John, for listeners who want to learn more about your work, your books, your teaching, what's the best way to find out more or connect with you?
Amazon is where all my books are, and you can see them behind me on the shelf. The white one that's next to The Path to AGI is the Chinese version of The Path to AGI. So my books have been translated into Chinese, Polish, Spanish, and I think some in French too. So all over the world. So Amazon for the books. If you want to see what I talk about, LinkedIn, go out there and connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want to understand what I do in totality, I have a website called The World of Analytics, all smashed together, and it's all there.
Again, I'm going to give a pitch on The Path to AGI. John was kind enough to send me a copy. I started on it over the weekend. I'm about a third of the way through. You can see it's tattered. I've read it on the beach. I got it wet. I also said it's pretty good. It's 400 pages, so it's great to also swat away, aerial rats on the beach. Great job there. Okay, last one, John, and then I'm going to let you go. I can't believe you got it as much as we did, as quickly as we did. If you had to summarize your leadership philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
Laissez-faire.
Okay. I'll let you clarify that.
I tend to hire people who are highly independent, very intelligent, and self-driven. So I give them a lot of rope, and I give them direction, and I swat away the aerial rats, and give them air cover. Other than that, I let them run. It's pretty much hands off, and you get some brilliant, brilliant discoveries and brilliant innovations that way. So I'm just about as far away from a micromanager as you could get.
I think my biggest impression that I've taken from this call is, for somebody who spends so much time thinking about AI and artificial minds, you have a keen focus on the human mind, which as the basis of all of it, which I love. Well, thank you so much for the time, John. This was one of my favorite episodes ever. And we've done 100. So great stuff. I love it.
I really, truly enjoyed it. Hopefully we'll be able to do it again soon.
I'm looking forward to that. And that is a wrap on this episode of the Bridgecast. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, please hit subscribe, leave us a review, share it with your team. More importantly, don't miss a future episode on your drive or on the treadmill, and we will catch you soon on another episode of the Bridgecast. Thanks so much. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepoint Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepoint, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepoint, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.